Now, in, in typical Barbara Beitch fashion, I'm surprised we have so many people. We thought we were going to have a quaint, maybe 40 or 50 people. We don't need a microphone. It'd be really nice in the library, really cozy. Um, uh, uh, we have John. Where's John? John traveling from Illinois to come. An alum. Really, just amazing. What a turnout. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Izzo. I'm the head of school. We are really excited to have all of you on campus. Unfortunately, we're here due to Barbara's passing, but this morning's going to be really a time of celebration. And I have a few remarks I'm going to make, and then we have a number of speakers. Following after that, we'll have lunch in the dining room. We were going to have lunch here, but we just don't have enough space. So, but anyway, I've been here for a long time. It's my 35th year. Considered Barbara a friend. I admired her. Known her for obviously a long time. She retired in 2004, but was always around. During her time at the school, her 3.5 decades, we can't overstate how much of an impact she had on this school. She was a wonderful educator. She had a passion for biology, but her influence went far beyond the classroom. Barbara was a mentor. She was an advocate, an advisor, a motivator, a creator, an activist, and so much more. She founded several clubs during her tenure and established groundbreaking programming and curriculum. When reflecting on her teaching style for an article that was written in 2004, for last year at Hamden Hall, she commented, "I'm demanding of myself, and I demand of my students as well. I think I've been fair in my teachings. I think I've taught them to feel the joy of learning and the feeling of accomplishment." While my tenure as head of school started after Barbara's retirement, during my pre-head of school years at Hamden Hall, I remember thinking how lucky the school was to have so many long-standing, talented educators. A good number of them are with us this morning. Thank you for being here. It says a lot about the relationships Barbara formed with her colleagues and the respect they have for her contributions to the school. I also remember the days when I was coaching the golf team, and we had away matches late in the spring season, just when AP exam prep was gearing up. Unfortunately, with golf, early dismissals seem to happen more than other sports. So picture Dr. Beitch's reaction when a student had to miss a handful of critical AP biology classes in late April or early May. Boy, would she get mad at me. And I was just trying to prepare to beat Brunswick. That was it. She cared about her students' success and wanted to make sure that they were as prepared as possible. And I've always said in my mind, other than actually knowing the material, one of the key successes of an AP instructor at a school like Hamden Hall is that the teacher has to be really competitive, because they need to want the students to do so well that they won't stop until they know that the students are prepared as possible. People like Barbara are the individuals who preserve the rigor of the curriculum, who demonstrate the expected commitment level of our professional staff, and who ultimately protect the culture of the school. Hamden Hall of 2024 is built on the foundation of all who came before us. While Barbara may have been small in stature, her contributions to this institution are anything but small. In May 2008, Barbara was among the first honorees who were inducted into the inaugural Hamden Hall Perennial Pine Society. Extolled as legendary faculty, all of them had two things in common: 30 or more years of service to the school, and an unparalleled record of academic excellence and achievement. Fortunately for Hamden Hall, Barbara continued her affiliation with our school community and continued to support and impact our mission to educate young people. In fact, she was at the October open house with Richard, homecoming with Richard. She personally oversaw the Deborah Beitch Janis 1982 Memorial Fund, which she had established upon her daughter's passing in 1994. You can view some of the more recent program initiatives and the funds supported with Barbara's approval and input on the poster board that's right over there. So very involved in the school. You'll hear so much more this morning about the enormity and magnitude of Barbara's life from several planned speakers. So before I call up our first speaker, Barbara's granddaughter, Sarah Janis, let's watch a slideshow that Sarah created as a tribute to her grandmother. After Sarah finishes her remarks, Dawn Maselli, who, by the way, is our advancement director, does so much at Hamden Hall and did all the planning for this morning. So a shout out for Dawn. So after Sarah completes her remarks, Dawn will let you know, and you know who you are, who the next speaker is, and. Just make sure that we have folks from the Hamden Hall community, from her family, as well as her Barbara's outside interests. So we have a really, really extraordinary mix of folks here. Just let everybody know who you are. Okay, Sarah?
I'm too short for podiums, so I'll stand here. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm Barbara's granddaughter, and we called her Nana, so that's how you'll hear me refer to her. My Nana was a teacher, a traveler, a biologist, a nature lover, and I hope nobody here is offended when I say she was also a badass. She was a wonderful grandparent, and I loved. Okay. I loved and admired her. As you saw, she was able to walk me down the aisle and give a toast at my wedding in April of 2023. Over the course of my life, she instilled in me a love of learning and traveling to new places. My first trip out of the country was with my grandparents, my Nana and Poppy, or Barbara and Erwin, as well as my brother Andy. They took us to the island of Bonaire to earn our junior scuba diving license, which was one of their favorite hobbies. She also inspired a goal that I have to visit all 50 states, which is something that she was able to accomplish in her lifetime. My Nana taught me it's never too late to change your life and chase your dreams. When she retired, she picked up playing piano regularly again and became a docent at the Yale Peabody Museum. When my grandfather passed away, she was able to find love again in her 70s with Richard. And after teaching sex ed to high school students for many years, later in life she also taught seminars to seniors so they could learn and speak more comfortably about their sexuality. In the last few years especially, we would often have deep conversations when we spent time together. It's an interesting transition going from being someone's grandchild as a child to being also their grandchild and friend as an adult. And the last time I saw her was this past fall, and we just by chance happened to have a conversation about regret. My Nana expressed that she didn't live with regret. She was happy with her life, and though things didn't always go according to plan, she looked back with fondness on the memories and was proud of what she had accomplished. It makes me both happy and sad to remember this conversation because she lived a wonderful life, but she still had life left to live. I want to leave you with a Mary Oliver poem about the purpose of life and appreciation for nature. It mentions prayer, and neither my Nana nor I are religious, but I think you can substitute prayer for awe of nature or feelings of pleasure in just simply being alive. The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, and how to stroll through the fields. which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else is it that I should have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andy. I am Barbara's grandson. Give me a moment and I'll pull up my speech. Barbara was and will forever be my Nana. She and I, we go way back. Nana was a month away from reaching the half-century mark, and I was seconds, maybe minutes old. Barbara held many titles in her life, but she was exceptionally proud to be my mother's birthing partner. And I'm glad she could be there for my arrival into the world. And from the start, Barbara and I, we just couldn't get enough of each other. My first home after leaving the hospital was Barbara and Irwin's home on Mount Sanford Road. There, my mom and I stayed for a couple of weeks of my life. In the years to follow, Barbara and I shared many happy memories together. For the sake of time, I'll relate just one. When I was 13 years old, Barbara brought me along for a Hamden Hall biology student trip to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. Yeah, I was very privileged to know her and to experience that. Anybody who's read Darwin, especially The Voyage of the Beagle, knows how this would appeal to her evolutionary biologist within her. So it was very special. Our journey started on the mainland in Ecuador, in the capital city of Quito. Upon our arrival, I realized I had forgotten a toothbrush. And so Barbara, always solving the problems, resolved to bring me to a local convenience store to remedy the issue. She was kind enough to invite some of her students to come along. Remember, this is a Hamden Hall trip, so the students came along too. And as when we arrived, we found my toothbrush. That was no problem. But lo and behold, this same convenience store sold condoms. Barbara exclaimed with such satisfaction, "I collect these from all over the world to show my students." And thus it came to pass that Nana caused me secondhand embarrassment by enthusiastically announcing that she was going to purchase prophylactics, but only for the education of malleable young minds. I could have chosen a more conventional memory of Nana, but let's face it, she was not a conventional person. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I wish I could be funny, but I never was. My grandson said to me one day, "Grandma, you have no sense of humor." And I said, "But I do. My students laugh all the time." And he said, "Grandma, they're laughing at you." So I have to talk to you in a serious way. I have 2 poems to read to you. And I would have read the one you, Sarah. I love her, and I'm going to end with her. The first one is by Robert Frost, and it's called "Nothing Gold Can Stay." Nature's first green is gold. her hardest hue to hold, her early leaves of flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. When Bill Hunter, my colleague in the English department, heard of Barbara's death, he told me she was a solar to the English department at Hamden Hall. Barbara was my colleague and my dear friend. She also corrected my English comments, and which she returned to me for revision. Barbara's religion was the philosophy of knowledge, her love of biology and nature, and her teaching. She held extraordinarily high standards for herself and conveyed these values and ethics to her students who are sitting here and the parents of those students. She started one of the first LBGQ clubs in the area's educational institutions, and it's also been noticed that her courses in sexuality and child rearing were other successful firsts. As an English teacher, it was very hard for the baby to start to cry in the middle of one of my very important classes. So the mommy had to feed the baby and then come back. Dr. Beitch was indeed gold. When I learned of Barbara's untimely death, I called her dear husband, and I told him I had no words, because I really didn't with all my talking, except those of Elizabeth Bishop in her poem, One Art. And I still feel it. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 beloved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the intense voice, a gesture I love. I shan't have lied. It's evident. The art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like write it like disaster.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Linda Broker, and I'm reading these remarks on behalf of Signan McGeary, who was a very dear friend, longtime friend of Barbara's. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Friendship is unnecessary. Like philosophy, like art, it has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things which give value to survival." My friendship with Barbara spanned 50 years. Beginning in 1973, we were thrust together as faculty wives at Quinnipiac University. I admit to being intimidated by Barbara in those early days of friendship. She was just so darn brilliant and had a strong, independent feminist voice. Her friendship and support of my efforts to find my own professional voice made a huge difference in my life. With our young families, we shared the fun of camping. They bought a VW camper first, and we then copied them and bought a VW camper too. Years later, Barbara, Irwin, Ken, and I earned our scuba diving certificates. This resulted in wonderful underwater marine life adventures, particularly exploring various reefs. Just a few years ago, Barbara and I traveled to Isla Mujeres, a small island off Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, with the goal to dive with the whale sharks. This is the friend I loved, adventurous and fearsome. Fearless. The Peabody Discovery Room was another of our endearing educational and long-term shared activities. For about 7 years, 1 day a week, we studied and worked together to provide up-to-date information to visitors about the living creatures in the Discovery Room, including the leaf-cutting ants indigenous to Costa Rica. We gathered leaves for the ants and observed their symbiotic relationship with fungus. Who else but Barbara would invest so much energy to understand the physiology of ants and help others understand too? My heart's treasury will include the special memory of my last adventure with my friend Barbara. Together we rode the Metro North train to New York City to visit the newly opened leaf-cutting ant exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History. I must tell you, Barbara grilled the attendant at the display area. Frankly, we both agreed the New York exhibit was inferior to the exhibit in the old Discovery Room at the Peabody. What I value most from our half-century friendship was her selfless gift to me that included support, respect, love. She stimulated the ongoing desire to learn, to explore, to exchange ideas, and thus live a full and rich life. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Frank Alfaro. I'm a chemistry teacher in the department here, science department. I arrived at Hamden Hall in 2004, and my first unofficial event was to go to Barbara's going away party, which is happening that summer. I think is Dan here today? By any chance? No, I think Dan's in Florida. I'm sorry? Thank you. I should, let me just interject something here, and I'm not going to be long. I have some notes, which I hope I can read. But I want to apologize for any name forgetting or halting speech, because, sorry, I'm not going to go there. It's okay. But there was a going away party for Barbara, and Dan Zavello. It was at, if I remember correctly, I think this is correct, it was at his home in Hamden, and he invited me to come and say, there's a way for you to meet the faculty. The first faculty member I met was Barbara, because he walked out to me and said, "Who are you?" And in a way that, of course, is unique to Barbara. And I said, "I'm Frank Israel. I'm a new science teacher. I'll be teaching chemistry in the fall." So that was my introduction to Barbara. I have a few notes that I want to not forget to say something about. First of all, I want to thank Barbara. This was alluded to. I don't think it was mentioned specifically, for funding the Beitch Prize for Science Research and Innovation. I'm not sure what the title was. And I had the pleasure of guiding many students through research projects over the last 20 years. And several of them have won the Beitch Award that they received at graduation. what I always appreciated about Barbara, because we kind of kept in touch, and occasionally we'd see at a Hamden Hall function, was her rigor that she always took to her work and had the same expectation for her students. And I was the same way. So we were like two birds with the same feathers. I do wish I knew there was going to be. I should have figured there'd be a slideshow, but I have a picture of Barbara with the then science members of the faculty, Bruce Sundell, and one other person, Dan Zavello, standing on a girder in the unfinished building. I'll try to. I mean, I'll send that to Dawn. Dawn can send it to other people. But it was great. I found it in my classroom many years ago. That was, of course, when the Swain was under construction. I think it is even though this is one memorial service, it's time for people to remember that the building Swain is named after Mike Swain, who passed away. Just last week or two. But anyway. I'm not gonna. My problem with this crying is I'm going to give you a little explanation. Some of you might know it, but I was in an auto accident back in June and suffered a concussion. And one of the two things happened. One is I get very teary.
You need some help. I'll help you. I'll help you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You got it.
I forget the second one.
That's okay.
I get very teary. One. It's just they tell me it's a TBI thing. What's the other thing I was going to say?
You were saying you had a concussion. That's why you cry a lot.
Right.
Yes.
There's something I can't remember.
And you can't remember stuff.
And
That's okay.
that happens a lot. It doesn't happen with old memories. It happens with newer things. I get forgetful.
Yeah.
But I will end by saying this is way.
You were very close to Barbara.
We had similar educational philosophies, and it was very rewarding to have Barbara around. So I'm gonna stop there.
And you're going to end there.
What's your name?
Barbara.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. I'm fine. I can walk.
I know, but I can't. You can help me. I'm a little unsteady.
Oh, thank you for coming out.
Now who's going to walk me back?
Where you going?
My sister can help me. She's
I'll walk you back.
No, you're good. I'm
You
good.
sure?
Thank you. Very nice.
You're
You're welcome.
So nice to see all of you. I am Kay McGart, and my husband was headmaster of Hamden Hall before Bob Izzo from 1991 to 2004, and he retired with Barbara. So besides the great admiration I had for her as a sort of social affiliate of Hamden Hall, I didn't actually teach here, but I had the great pleasure of knowing her. And for those, and I'm speaking today, not just as the wife of the previous head, but also because I had the pleasure of also knowing her in retirement. After 2004, she, as you saw from Sarah, learned the piano. She continued all her commitment to the environment. She had taken us, when we first arrived to Connecticut, on our first walk of Sleeping Giant. She started the Gay Straight Alliance, as Betty Lou mentioned. She continued that into retirement with a Zoom on sexuality for seniors. She was absolutely undaunted in her passion and her commitment to all things science. And it's so wonderful to see the students and the people who are affected from the field of science. If you knew Barbara or continued her legacy through science? Would you just indicate to those of you around and with a hand raise? There, look at this. Look at this. And I have a retirement issue of the Hamden Hall alumni magazine that shows my husband and John Garfield and Barbara Beitch with the heading, I thank you, it must have been Jody that did this, top of the class. And it was written by Iris Insania, whom some of you may have known, who herself went on in medicine. So I just wanted to just tell you what, as it just someone who knew her socially and crossed these two chapters into retirement, what an influence she had. The last, I'll just tell you one quick story, and that is when we first came in the 90s. Jim had such great respect for Barbara with her intellectual drive and high standards for the kids, and creative teaching. She had ordered, thank you, Betty Lou, these electronic babies. Now, this was new to us. We'd come up from Houston, and we're at kind of an old-fashioned school that didn't have a biology teacher that ordered these little robot babies. But it was parent education, or it was called. It wasn't. It was one of her bio courses for future parents, obviously, and these babies were programmed to need to be fed. And I didn't know they cried in class, Betty Lou, but they did all, and the kids had to actually enter the data into the baby. And so if you were a negligent parent, it would show up at the end, okay? So, but Jim just thought it was kind of fun, but it was a distraction for other teachers, of course, because the babies had to be carried around. They were given to the students on a rotating basis. And so when it was baby time, a different student would have a baby and so forth. But so I heard these fun stories, but I didn't really, it really hit home one night when we got a phone call at the headmaster's house. And it was very dark. And these phone calls, weren't something you look forward to. We didn't know what. So, Jim said, okay, yes, I'll be right over. And he turned to me and he said, well, one of the basketball players left his baby in the gym, and and only I have the key. So thank you very much, and also to the friends from Home Haven, who is our retirement group, and we even have Linda, whose daughter went to Hamden Hall and is now with the retirement group. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Tom Odenak. I was a student at Hamden Hall from 1970 to 1974 when I graduated. And let me start by saying I feel really privileged to be part of this group as a whole. All told, I was a student for 23 years, 26 if you include my medical residency. And I have to say, in all those years of education, the majority of the best, most dedicated, most inspiring teachers I had were at Hamden Hall in those 4 years, some of whom are here today. So ironically, I never had Barbara Beitch for biology, her wheelhouse and her love, but she was my geometry teacher in 9th grade and my physics teacher in 11th grade. Two memories that spring to mind that she might appreciate. In geometry class, as she often did toward the end of the period, she started reading out the homework assignments. On page 52, do the even number problems. On page 56, do the odd number problems. On page 61, do problems 2, 3, 5, 12, and 11, and 13. And it kept going on and on and on until at one point she became aware of the collective groaning that was going on in the class. And she looked up with her impish grin and said, "I'm just trying to keep you off the streets." So I have Dr. Beitch to thank for saving me from a life of crime and degeneracy. In physics, now this was an honors physics class, and the curriculum was designed for us to learn through discovery. And we had to really work through problems. It wasn't just a matter of learning, memorizing formula. And it was really a challenging but fun class. And there was one moment where we had this long discussion. We were learning about light refraction and talking about how when the sun rises and sets, we get all these beautiful colors because the light keeps bending at different angles and it goes through the spectrum. So we kicked this around for a while and came to the conclusion that at some point the sky must be green. And none of us had ever seen a green sky. I was like, that's crazy. But it has to be. And Barbara was content to just leave it at that. So fast forward about 25 or 30 years, I came across an article in American Science magazine. I don't remember what it was about. And they actually mentioned that, how the sky looks green at certain moments and places because of that refraction. And I actually had an opportunity to mention that to Barbara at one of the alumni reunions some years ago. And she was tickled, but I'm not sure if it was as much because there was confirmation of this as that I remembered the discussion. But I somewhere in the 26 years of my education, I got a master's in education. And so I actually taught for 2 years. And let me tell you, teaching is hard. And being a good teacher is tremendously hard. And so I am, to this day in awe of all the great teachers that I had, and Dr. Beitch in particular as one of them. And I am thankful for the experience. And for her, among others, inspiring me to pursue a life of lifelong learning. So thank you.
My name is Alan Hillman, and I am the outlier here because I know this extraordinary woman, and I like to say I know, not I knew, only in the last 12 years. I'm a lawyer, so I do a lot of speaking, and one thing I know about speaking at events is that you never want to follow the funniest speaker. This is a terrible mistake I just made. Extraordinary speeches. So many wonderful speeches here. I'm going to read this because I know if I get it wrong, Barbara will somehow tell me. I've been a friend of Barbara's and Richard for about 12 years, and we became acquainted through a monthly discussion group concerning the American Civil Liberties Union. I'm a member of the national board, but I've been involved in the local area for a fair number of years. And we have a discussion group based on articles I send around from the papers and magazines every month, and then we talk for an hour and a half every month about the articles or whatever other people want to talk about. And most of the people live in the greater New Haven area, but we have people in California, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. Everyone in the group deeply respected Barbara and, I would say, also Richard. Both of them were faithful, and Richard will continue to be faithful contributors to our discussions on innumerable subjects. And when it comes to innumerable subjects, I think we all know who knew more about innumerable subjects. I don't believe I've ever met a person, and my wife is a professor at Yale, who knew more about so many things as Barbara did. She was a very faithful reader of all the articles and took pleasure in correcting me when I was characterizing what they were saying. I learned as much from Barbara as certainly as she did from me, much more. I came to value her wisdom, her experience, her inquisitiveness, her candor, and I will say her kindness to others, but let me say firm kindness to others. She was always respectful, but she certainly let you know when she had a view that was different from yours. The beauty of that was Barbara was invariably right. I say wisdom because her knowledge was so vast, as you all know, and so important in her areas of expertise, which were, of course, biology, LGBTQ subjects, a particular interest of the ACLU, free expression, nature and the environment, and also human nature. She spent a lifetime, as you know, learning and imparting her knowledge to many people in this room and literally thousands of others. Well, I say inquisitiveness because she so frequently asked questions of others, not just to cross-examine, but because she needed more information, because she never lacked the inquisitiveness that we all wish we had. She knew the truth of an adage my father told me once, which was that the only bad question you can ask is the one you don't ask. I say candor for the reasons we all know. She always provided us with her honest perspective, even when it differed from others. And again, she was kind in a very special way. She had that incredible bright smile you all know about, you all saw in the magnificent work that her granddaughter did. So no matter what she was saying, she had that bright smile on her face, and you could listen to what she said, explaining how just terribly misguided you were. But she offered it in the best possible spirit, and I know I benefited a great deal from that. We relied so much on her, and we do so much on Richard, who's become a wonderful friend of mine, particularly in this time of sadness and reflection. I can only say how much I admired her, how much affection I have for her. I want to say, not I had, and for Richard. My great regret is that I never got to hear her play the piano in person. I was invited to a recital and was unable to go. Richard advises me that I will be able to hear her on recordings. She was simply one of the most extraordinary people I ever met. I'm reminded of something. Many, many years ago, Reader's Digest had a section called The Most Extraordinary Person I Ever Met. And if you sent something in that was accepted, you got $250. And I sent in several of those, never won a nickel. But if I'd known Barbara then, I would have won the $250. She can't be replaced, but we will always be beneficiaries of what she taught us. Thank you.
My name is Julie Halton, and I know Barbara through Sleeping Giant State Park. It's been a long and wonderful relationship, and as the previous speaker said, I think of this in the present tense. Barbara is, her spirit is with us. Barbara Beitch, as you all know, was an exceptional human being. Genuinely interested in those she met, she made each of us feel as if we were unique and singularly important to her. I met Barbara through our mutual work at Sleeping Giant State Park. Her love of and contributions to this local treasure were indeed a blessing. She was remarkably generous in sharing her gifts and enthusiasm amid her many passions, activities, and interests. She always listened to other viewpoints and voiced encouragement for new initiatives. She was a person who cared and cared deeply. It was a pleasure to work with her during our joint time together. Barbara was a true friend of Sleeping Giant State Park. Never seeking self-promotion, she was ever ready to participate in the volunteer work that brought this marvelous and legendary park to the public's attention. She, with her late husband Irwin, was instrumental in creating, advocating, and participating in programs that attracted participants to the park and enhanced the joy and learning visitors found there. As a board member of the Friends Group, she chaired the Hiking and Camping Committee beginning in 1984, and even after camping was no longer offered, she continued as chair of the hiking program for several years. An avid hiker herself, she initiated the Giant Masters program in 1995. It's a program where if you are a member of the Friends Group and you hike all 32 miles of trails, you get a badge and a certificate. She initiated the program. Since the program start, 593 individuals have completed that challenge, many going on for so-called advanced degrees, like 4-season masters and giant marathoners, all the hikes, all 32 miles in a day. Barbara assumed the editorship of the Giant News, the newsletter of the Friends Group, in 2008. She worked tirelessly, soliciting articles on an array of pertinent subjects from board members and park visitors alike. Barbara was also a member of the Invasive Species Committee dedicated to protecting native plants. Barbara organized a BioBlitz for 3 successive years that sent professional and avocational scientists out into the field to document the flora and fauna that flourished on the Giant. Their findings are still available online. Barbara officially resigned from the Friends Group Board of Directors in 2014, but continued her interest in its programs and initiatives. It was not often that we shared a cup of tea, but once sitting in her sunroom, it was as if it were yesterday. We would not only reminisce about our time advocating and working for the park, but also share from the heart. I was truly blessed to know and work with her. Thank you.
My name is Gail. I too served on the board of the Park Association with Barbara for many years. I enjoyed working with her, and being the forever teacher, I learned a lot from her. Barbara was a special person who survived many tragedies in her life with courage, strength, and dignity. And she was fortunate to have Richard by her side these last few years to help her through some difficult times. My memories of her will always include her warm smile, her endless energy, and her passionate dedication to all of the causes she cared so deeply about. She will be missed by many, and I am honored to have known her.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Burns, my mother Annette, my brother Glenn. Our family met Barbara in probably 1968. She and Irwin were in the process of adopting their son Ricky, and they put her in touch with my mom, who had adopted me and thought they could help each other. And she immediately called my mother and was preparing for the home study visit and said, "How clean does my house have to be? Is this thing going to work?" So From that day on, though, they were the best of friends. They were. She was the sister my mom never had. My bonus mom. We spent countless holidays together: Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's. They were family. Because she was teaching at Hamden Hall, she encouraged my mom to come teach at Hamden Hall. So I consider a lot of my life, the trajectory of it was because of Barbara. My brother and I were able to come to school at Hamden Hall, and my mother taught for 15 years. It provided us the opportunity. My brother, being here at school, met Helen Sheehy, got involved in the theater program. His career has taken off from there. From there, he went to school in North Carolina, where he met his beautiful wife. So because of Barbara, he is where he is.
That's fact.
Because of Barbara, I have two of the best friends in my life who are still here, who are here today with me, and it's because I came here because of Barbara. I, of course, took biology with Barbara. I was not the best student, and she reminded me of that. Read that poem about the little girl with the little curl, and but I don't need to expand on her skills as a teacher and educator, as you all know what she did. My fondest memories are some of the early days of the basement at Mount Sanford Road, playing with Ricky and Debbie, and playing tetherball in the backyard. Her helping adopt my first cat, of course, from the neighborhood. Giving me relationship advice and private conversations that we had that I still reflect on today. Just always being there with advice and gentle love. Being the first to come visit my son in the hospital as a newborn, and helping me focus on self-care, and always being the best cheerleader with sensitivity and love. And that was Barbara. Even through her own challenges, she persevered, always continuing to make the world a better place with her voice and actions. And she did that up until her passing. She made all of our worlds a better place by just being herself.
Part of what I have to say was written by Masha Eckert, who is the director of Pianophoria. And Barbara and I attended Pianophoria, which is a piano camp for adults in Manhattan, right off Broadway. All right. And so many years together, we went there every summer, studied piano. And what Masha has said, I think, is so true of who she is. So we all know she was a scientist and an academic, but she was also an avid amateur pianist with insatiable curiosity about everything to do with music and piano playing. Barbara was the one who asked the most questions at every presentation and made sure that she understood completely everything being discussed. Her playing grew by leaps and bounds over the years that the Pianophoria attendees knew her. When it came to performing, she was fearless. That curiosity of hers seemed to extend to everything that piqued her interest as well. And she had an amazing sensitivity to beauty and all living things. And it is for this reason that so many of us are here celebrating her life. And I will be forever grateful to have had those summer weeks together for the last 10 years, participating, playing duets together, roaming around Manhattan looking for restaurants, and finding a place to sit and have a cup of tea. It was a wonderful experience. And this summer, we had the pleasure of bumping into this young lady, on Broadway, of all places. And had a wonderful conversation with her. So we have been such a part of our lives, our children's lives, that I don't know how each day will go without my remembering her and wondering why I can't just tell her what's on my mind now. And this is my son.
So my wife handed me this sweater this morning, said put it on, because Barbara gave it to me as a Christmas present. And that's who she was. For all of us, she was a sweater that wrapped around us, kept us warm, and is inside of us as a part of us. And I think if there's a person in the world that is immortal, it's her. You mentioned the Volkswagen camper, and I got to tell this quick little Hamden Hall story. We were on a Hamden Hall camping trip in the Volkswagen camper with Vicki and Debbie, and Erwin at the wheel, Barbara with the map, and the rest of us piled into the back with all the camping stuff. And the camper died on the side of the road. And so here we are, I don't know, 9th grade or something, 10th grade, pushing the camper down the highway at a trot with Barbara hanging out the window, push, Erwin steering. And we pushed that thing all the way, I don't know, halfway across Vermont down the highway until we found a repair shop. And then we all sat on the curb with them taking care of us, and the bus being fixed, and went on our way. And, those were the experiences that she gave all of us that make her part of us for the rest of our lives. I carry her with me every day. She was perhaps the only person, one of the very few people in the world that I could go to, that I could trust. Unconditional. She was really unconditional love for everybody. And there's nobody like that in the world other than her. Yeah. Miss her.
Wonderful to see all of you. My name is John Abelson, class of 74. I must say I feel like I'm coming home. So more than a half century ago, here at Hamden Hall, Barbara was a fledgling teacher, and I started 9th grade. We were surrounded by a world of challenges. The Vietnam War dragged on. Cars and power plants spewed out untreated exhaust. And some universities were still deciding whether or not to admit women students. So students like me wanted to save the world, and Barbara inspired us to lead change. With Barbara, nothing was impossible. We bicycled to Hartford, the state capital, to signal that there were alternatives to cars. We organized a drive to recycle newspapers, so successful that once we filled the Hamden Hall school bus from floor to ceiling with papers, only to discover that the recycling center was closed and the bus was needed for an away game the next day. I will not quote Sonny Coughlin upon... I have paused, as so many of you have, to contemplate the qualities that made Barbara so influential. She radiated the joy of learning. Every question she posed was worth thinking about. She told the underlying truth, always. And she never felt like a teacher, but instead our colleague in the pursuit of knowledge and a better life for all. How fortunate that I saw Barbara periodically over the years, usually involving Chinese takeout. We talked, Then she played piano and I sang artsy songs. Some years ago at the University of Illinois, I led the formation of an interdisciplinary program in energy and sustainability studies. The task was not easy, but it was not impossible. Barbara and I discussed with great zeal the sustainability projects created by my students. Thus, the circle continues. Barbara lives on through her profound influence on my life and career, as with yours. But oh, how I wish I could talk with her again. Thank you.
If I had known Barbara was so well loved, I would have been nicer to her. Okay. I never expected to be here helping to lay my sister to rest. I was sure I would die before her, even though she was 5 years older, but a much healthier person. She took good care of herself, and I really haven't. It's just the hard truth. She never smoked. She exercised regularly, and I thought that she didn't even keep sugar in her house because I could never find it when I was there. But Richard tells me that there was sugar there somewhere.
There was sugared food as well. But she was cautious.
She was protecting me from myself. I'm the one with diabetes. So, after both her children, Debbie and Rick, had died, she expressed her grief and her concern about me, saying, "I'm not burying anyone else who's younger than I am." That's the way she felt. That was like an order, But I didn't believe her because she was a survivor. And I really expected her to live forever. She took adversity, even catastrophe, in stride. Our mother, who was a very sweet person, gave up a career in teaching to become a housewife, which was fairly typical for the women of her generation. Excuse me. She also had to give up a close contact with her original family, who did not get along with my father. Dad was a brilliant physicist, but a very difficult family man. He would yell about something at someone virtually every day. I often confronted him. That was my nature. Barbara would just hide until the storm passed. She admired me for standing up to him, and in retrospect, I admire her for her more peaceful way of dealing with the problem. But it was a problem. But she found a non-destructive means of survival. Barbara was Dad's favorite, and deservedly so. She was responsible while I was rebellious and prone to taking risks. Before Barbara became a biologist, Excuse me, I just lost my place. It's farther down than I thought. Okay. Before Barbara became a biologist, she pursued a doctorate in mathematics at Brandeis, but that just didn't work for her. With Dad's guidance and support, she cut her losses and took up biology at the University of Virginia. That's where she met Erwin Beitch. He was in the same program. And they became friends, and then they became romantically involved. And, excuse me, were married in the rose garden of our parents' home in Charlottesville. It was really a beautiful relationship, and Erwin was like a brother to me. I loved it. Excuse me, I'm having a little technical problem here.
Will this be any easier to follow? This is yours. And you're
Okay.
You're here.
Okay. Thank you.
Just scroll down.
In 1965, our mother, having survived breast cancer, succumbed to a heart attack. She was 59 at the time. Barbara was married with a child. She was in graduate school at this point, so she did her grieving pretty much privately, because we weren't living in the same household at the time. But she had pressure from all directions with multiple responsibilities, and but she carried on taking care of her young family and pursuing her studies. Dad was slow to accept Erwin as his son-in-law. No one was good enough for his little girl, of course. But he told me later that Erwin was a rock when Mom died, and he grew to respect him at that point. Dad also knew how to fight back against adversity. He remarried in 1965, bought property out in the country, had a house built, and suffered a heart attack. Then in 1967, he fell to a second heart attack. Barbara and I were on our own at that point. Our Mostowitz grandparents were first cousins. Back in the 19th century, it was legal for first cousins to marry in most places. Possibly as a result of that, many of their descendants have problems with their mental health. It affected my mother and several of her siblings who suffered bipolar disease. So does my daughter, and so did her cousin Debbie. That was a great worry to Barbara, and I'm sure that Barbara was a firm believer in getting counseling when you need it, and that was her advice to Debbie, and she took it. She was on her way to a session on I-95, and her car crossed over the median, flipped over, and she was killed instantly. Her children, Andy and Sarah, whom you've met, were very young at that time. So Barbara became like a mother to them, and I think continued in that capacity right up until her death. I read somewhere that 3/4 of marriages fail following the death of a child. Theirs did not. A testament to their dedication and determination to make it work. They traveled widely. I'm talking about Barbara and Erwin now. The last big trip they took together was to China. Shortly after that, in October 2009, they were in Albany to help celebrate Erwin's cousin's birthday when he became violently ill. He was rushed to a nearby emergency room, but he was gone. So, having lost a child, Barbara was now a widow. She hurt terribly, but she did not. She didn't give up on making her life meaningful. She continued to teach. She maintained her home. She provided comfort to her 3 grandchildren who had lost their pappy. She was just an active person under any circumstances. During her intense grieving, it was Rick, the son who had a difficult childhood, who became her rock. He took care of problems with the house and provided emotional support. Early the following year, Barbara undertook a new project, which was to find love again. Using a social networking organization, she found Richard, and he found her, and they fell in love. A little later, Barbara, my wife Pamela, and I took a multi-purpose trip out west. We spent some time in the redwood forest in Oregon and in Northern California, and then we drove down the coast farther down in Northern California to attend the bar mitzvah of my cousin's grandson. I'm sorry. During that ceremony, Barbara and I rudely chatted while we were sitting in the rain. They had arranged it outside, but I feel very guilty about that. Finally, we drove on down to San Francisco. I'd never been there. I'm not sure whether Barbara had, but we toured that city and saw what it had to offer. During this whole time, Barbara was like a giddy teenager the night of the prom. She couldn't stop talking about Richard. We were happy to see her being joyful again. Richard and I had not met each other at that point, but when we did finally meet, we got into a big argument over a political issue. Barbara looked like she wanted to crawl under a rock. So did my wife. I felt bad for them, and Richard did as well, but we were just unable to let it go. I won't tell you what the issue was. It must have seemed like the times when Dad and I fought for Barbara. I do regret that. Richard and Barbara were married in June of 2012. And they've had a happy life together until Barbara's death. But a few months after their marriage, Barbara's son Rick, who had done so well becoming a mensch, he remained close to his wife Chani following what must have been a friendly divorce. And they continued to live together as friends in Dallas. But just a few months after the wedding, as Barbara's and Richard's wedding in August, Rick decided to take a bike ride on a very hot day in August. At some point, he just collapsed and died. It's unclear to me, at least, whether it was a heart attack or a heat stroke, and it might have been both. He was 47 years old at the time. So now Barbara, having lost both parents, a husband much too soon, had lost both her children at what was really grotesquely young ages. It seemed to me that she was a walking example of life not being fair. But I think she never expected life to be fair. In any case, she grieved this loss as she had grieved the others. And then she got back to doing the things she loved. She survived. Adversity never stopped her from doing, from being, from living her life fully. I really think she must have lived forever. She would have lived forever if it had been up to her. I apologize for talking so heartily. I'm very tired. I was up all last night, so I hope you can bear with me. In the end, it was only her body that failed her. She kept it running despite its little imperfections, such as cancer, which she had 3 times, multiple strokes. She had COVID twice or 3 times? 3 times, despite having all the vaccinations. And she did that for 84 years. She had a good run. Well done.
Hello, Barbara's legacy. I am going to set some things straight. Barbara had a slogan that perfection is overrated. She didn't always adhere to that in her efforts, but she would be a little embarrassed, I think, at the incessant extolling of her. She was not perfect. And one of the things that worked between her and me in a relationship was we helped each other in many ways. And one of the ways I helped her was to get in touch with how she was wearing a suit of armor and did not grieve properly for a long time, but learned to grieve. She was extremely resilient. I have notes. Fortunately, everybody else has said most of what I would have said. That's why I wanted to be last, so I wouldn't preempt anyone, and so I would be able to shorten my spiel. I have never been loved the way Barbara loved me. And she fell in love with me almost instantly. I could see it, and she acknowledged it. No, I mean, not too long after we met. In fact, we met, and then she took this trip to California with Joel and Pam, And she was emailing me, writing on her phone, her goddamn phone, every day, long emails. I could respond from my computer. We're both touch typists. So we hardly saw each other. I needed much longer to get in touch with my love for her because I have had numerous relationships in my life, multiple marriages and other things, and yet Barbara trusted me. And I fell in trust with her. That's what happened first for me, the day we met. She exuded trust. And it was never, well, there was one time I'm not going to talk about, but aside from that, it was never betrayed. And we dealt with that. The greatest thing about our relationship was our honesty and openness with each other. I got her to go into therapy. She hadn't. But overachiever that she was, in about 6 months, she accomplished what I did in 40 or 50 years. And we had a couples counselor, and we had a deal. We had a couple of deals. One was, if either of us said we have to go see the couples counselor, we would do it. And that happened a few times when we were having problems. We had problems. She was not perfect. I was, but not. The other deal was if it ever came up that we might split up, we would first have 10 sessions with our couples counselor. That became a running joke. Time to start the 10 sessions. She proposed to both her husbands. She told Irwin she had to go. They were Ph.D. study at University of Virginia, and she had a project to go to. And she said, if we're going to be apart now, I'll probably date, and who knows what'll happen. Or we could get married. She waited because she knew my discomfort. I didn't need to be married again. I knew she liked being married. She'd been married to Irwin for almost 50 years. So when she did propose, I knew I had to say yes. But she waited until almost a year and a half, the New Year's after 2 August after we met, and then proposed. And, well, I said, okay. And I'm not sorry. We had a good time. We embraced each other's families. Barbara was thrilled to have 2 little children, to new grandchildren. They have flown in from Illinois, but Annette flew in from Florida. There she is, her piano buddy. I could make her laugh. That was my favorite thing. What I miss most is talking to her. And as some of the things I'm saying, I've told some of you, I've understood why charlatans are so successful at duping people into attending seances. It's such a desperate need to talk to her again that if I weren't rational, I would be prone to say, okay, let's find out. Fortunately, both Barbara and I were wiser than that. I never fully understood what she saw in me. But I kind of came to understand that there must be something really valuable about me if she could love me the way she did. Because I have a lot of doubts about my value and my worth. And she has pushed aside a lot of that in me, and I thank her for that. I realize, since she died, I've often had what problems with what should I do about this? So I would think, knowing Barbara as I did, I would think, oh, this is what WWBS. What would Barbara say? And I know, and 9 out of 10 times she was right. The 10th time I would argue. When she was alive, I argued much more frequently. I started to say I could make her laugh, and that was my favorite thing to do. I read to her. She loved me reading to her. When we met and got serious, I told her, you don't know how lucky you are you're going to be with an actor. And she learned that. And she loved my reading to her. And I had an audience. I loved being on stage. Today will be my last time on stage, more than likely. We had things we did for each other. I helped her with the computer, and she would do sewing for me. I never learned to sew. I'm a little marginally embarrassed to say that. We would review each other's writings and point out where things weren't clear or simply correct a locution. We took ballroom dancing lessons, and we enjoyed that. We enjoyed dancing together. I'm going to miss that. Well, we haven't been able to do it for a while. First, there was COVID, and I got very bad sciatica. And we've just been talking about maybe starting the lessons again in the weeks before she died. We were museum junkies. We could go to little town museums and enjoy ourselves. The weekend before she died, we went into New York. We stayed in New York and we went to museums. We found a new one, a little room, one little room that opened out onto the street. And we spent probably an hour there looking at the little things it had. We traveled a lot. This year, early in the year, we went to Grenada and Dublin. And in Dublin, one of the museums we went to, Barbara got, as she was wont to do, got into a conversation, in this case with a couple of probably middle-aged women who, I don't know if they were widowed or had been divorced, but they got to talking, of course, about sex. I should say, of course, with Barbara there, they, of course, got to talking about sex. And she insisted. She told them, you have to buy the Hitachi vibrator. And by the way, I learned that vibrators aren't just for women. She taught me a lot. She was my source for medical help. Since she died, I've had a few different problems. I haven't known what to do about them. I've been throwing food out. I used to show it to her. Is this spoiled? And she would look and say, oh, can't you see the bacteria there? No. Not bacteria. By a lot of things that would kill me. No. Or she'd say, no, this is fine. So now if I'm in doubt, I throw it out. I just don't trust myself to make that judgment. Her religion, she used to like to say, she worshipped on the, it's not on the computer. She worshipped at the library. And eventually that became the computer. So anytime there was a medical issue for her or me, she would go looking it up and explain it to me. What? What?
For me.
Oh, okay. Well, she would also sometimes talk to her sister-in-law, Joel's wife, Pam, who was a medical librarian at the University of Buffalo. They came down from Buffalo. Joel took trains from Buffalo to get here. We had a vow. We made a vow to each other. We often discussed, more than a few times, we discussed what happens when one of us dies. This was good because when she was dying, I had to say, let her die. I knew what she wanted. It's a little hard to get the doctors to tell me she was indeed going to die, but once that was clear, I said, you have to let her die. She had to pull the plug on Erwin when he was dying of septicemia. I realized I talked about how I would ask, imagine what she would say, advice she would give me. And I realized just in recent days, that's in me. Some of you talked about how Barbara's in you. That's part of who I am now. And I'm sure she had part of me in her while she was alive that knew what I would say about things. So that's probably going to be with me forever as long as I live. There's longevity on my mother's side of the family, so who knows? Oh, I'm skimming over my notes to skip everything other people have said. She liked, although she had no belief in a spiritual realm, she did like rituals. Indeed, she died the day after Thanksgiving. And on Thanksgiving, everything was fine. And we made a chicken together, roast chicken. And she made a special cranberry recipe that she then froze a bunch of, but I think I gave it to you, Andy? Yes. I have been trying to give things away. I'm hiring a declutterer to help me with that. I don't want my son to face what I'm going through right now. She left hundreds of files full of paper. Took me hours and hours and hours to go through them to pick out the 5 or 10% that I needed and throw everything else away. So I cursed her. People talked about how good she was. One of the things she did was she occasionally wrote letters to other widows when somebody lost a husband. And they seemed to really appreciate it. She wrote long statements trying to help and be supportive. She gave a lot of money away. Every December, she would spend hours donating to many places. Unfortunately, since she was dead this last month, most of them didn't get it. I couldn't do what she did. She did eye research at Columbia. She was aware of climate problems long before they became a real issue, a well-known issue. And we both attended an Al Gore program to teach about climate change, which we did together. You students, she remembered your projects. She could tell me, oh, that's so-and-so, and this is what she did, and how I helped her. And she was often remembering this with great pride. Oh, that's great. It's so great what these people did. I remember she told me she had a boa constrictor in her classroom. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She loved to name animals that way. Julius Caesar. Squeezer. Julius Squeezer. See, I know a little about what went on here. And I always tell people that the library, the biology lab is named after her. I don't know why, but I take some pride in what she achieved. I told her early on that I liked my students to call me by my first name. And she explained to me why she didn't. She wanted to be called Dr. Beitch because she was a woman, and it was a way of adding to respect. And there was an and to it, I'm forgetting, I'm blocking on. At any rate, over the years, when we were out somewhere, particularly in a place like a supermarket, and we would go to different places, I would sneak around to where she was behind her back and call out, Dr. Beitch! Or Dr. Beitch? Or Dr. Beitch? And she would, only the last few years did she reduce the reaction time to thinking it was one of her students. She was a grammar Nazi. Well, we both were. I know better, and still, she used to, before I knew her, and I don't know how long before, she used to carry a red marker with her. And she would go into supermarkets for, I don't know where else, and she would correct signs with her red marker. Oh, I forgot something that I want to start with. Just a moment. It fit her. It didn't fit me. It doesn't fit me. I meant to start wearing this because this example. She had this. She did this waggle dance, a bee waggle dance at Sleeping Giant, and the costume was down in our basement. Well, I'm going to show you another thing in a minute or so. Anyway, she liked diagramming sentences. I got her a little book on sentence diagrams. I don't think she ever actually read it. One of our favorite, I'm going to tell you these things. One of our most, favorite. One of the things we most objected to was the misuse of the term unique. Unique is absolute. You can't be more or less unique. But it's come to be that way. People always talk about being more unique. And the other one was lay and lie. Medical, with one exception, And Anne, I'm sorry if I offend you on this. My doctor is here. Our doctor. So it's gotten hard to say my instead of our a lot of the time. Almost without exception, they say lay down instead of lie down. Once or twice, Barbara tried to tell them otherwise. I don't think it got anywhere. I want to talk a little about her sexuality, as others have done that, because I would betray her if I didn't. This was so important to her to publicize, to be a model. She had an amazing libido for a woman her age. Far bigger than mine. And she liked that. I mean, she was happy. She was happy to have that. Our foreplay, ready for this? Consisted of talking and checking websites for information to correct what we were talking about. And the last thing I think I have to talk about briefly is her love of music. It's been addressed already. And you will, just a moment. Excuse me while I hide behind the curtain here. The music that you may have heard before this started, and you will hear during whatever time is left for lunch, which is no time at all, is from Peer Gynt. I think it's all from Peer Gynt. Is that right, Mary?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. We did a thing together, and this is what she wore. I narrated the story, and she played pieces from Grieg that were adapted for the piano. And during the Hall in Mountain King, boom, 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 she had this on while she played, and she had another mask on for something else. Anyway, Dawn, are you alive? You must be so distressed. We have only gone an hour past the closing time. Thank you all. Hi, I'm Richard Yanowitz.
And I'm Barbara Beitch.
And we've been collaborating to present this program that includes highlights from Henrik Ibsen's play Peer Gynt, combined with some of the incidental music that Edvard Grieg wrote for it. And here we go.
Thank you.